Isabella Blackwood had always been different, even by vampire standards. At 25, she possessed the ethereal beauty common to her kind, porcelain skin that seemed to glow in moonlight, eyes like liquid silver, and hair as black as midnight that cascaded down her back in perfect waves. But, unlike other vampires who thrived in the shadows, Isabella yearned for something her father, Lord Damien Blackwood, the most powerful vampire king in centuries, could never understand: a normal life. The Blackwood mansion stood like a Gothic fortress on the outskirts of Salem, Massachusetts, its towering spires and ancient stone walls hiding secrets that stretched back over 800 years. Within its walls, Isabella lived a life of luxury and imprisonment. Golden chandeliers cast dancing shadows across marble floors, priceless paintings adorned the walls, and servants moved like whispers through corridors that had witnessed the rise and fall of human civilizations. Lord Damien ruled his vampire empire with an iron fist. His presence commanded respect and fear from every supernatural being on the East Coast. Standing nearly 7 feet tall with piercing red eyes that could see into a person's soul, he had built his kingdom through centuries of calculated moves, strategic alliances, and, when necessary, brutal elimination of threats. His word was law, and no one, absolutely no one, dared to question his authority. Except his daughter. Isabella's rebellion had started small. At 16, she began refusing to attend the blood ceremonies that were central to vampire culture. At 18, she shocked the Vampire Council by announcing she wanted to attend Human University. At 21, she committed the ultimate act of defiance by getting a job at the local community college, working in their administrative office during night hours. "You disgrace our bloodline," Damien had thundered during one of their countless arguments. "We are apex predators, not servants to human institutions. Your great-grandmother conquered kingdoms. Your grandfather commanded armies. And, you want to file paperwork for mortals?" But Isabella stood her ground, her silver eyes flashing with inherited stubbornness. "I want to matter for something other than fear, father. I want to build something instead of just taking." The vampire community was scandalized. Ancient families who had served the Blackwoods for generations whispered behind closed doors about the young princess who acted more human than vampire. Some called her weak. Others wondered if she was mentally unstable. A few brave enough to voice their opinions suggested that perhaps Lord Damien's legendary control was finally slipping. Isabella's defiance wasn't just philosophical, it was practical and dangerous. She had secretly been surviving on synthetic blood supplements she ordered online, avoiding the traditional hunts that were considered essential to vampire strength and identity. She wore UV protective makeup during her evening college classes, allowing her to tolerate the artificial lighting that would normally cause her kind severe discomfort. Most shocking of all, she had been taking night classes in social work, dreaming of a career helping humans rather than preying on them. The breaking point came on a crisp October evening when Isabella announced her intention to move out of the family mansion and rent a small apartment near the college campus. The Vampire Council, consisting of 12 ancient and powerful vampires who advised Lord Damien, demanded an emergency meeting. "She threatens everything we've built," declared Countess Morgana Vex, a vampire so old she claimed to have known Vlad the Impaler personally. "If word spreads that a Blackwood lives among humans as their equal, our authority crumbles." Lord Victor Castellane, another council member whose family controlled vampire territories across 3 states, leaned forward in his ornate chair. "The girl needs to be brought to heel. Publicly. Make an example of her before this infection of human sympathy spreads to other young vampires." But Lord Damien, despite his fury at his daughter's choices, still loved Isabella with a fierce, protective intensity that had survived centuries of disappointments. "She is my blood," he said quietly, his voice carrying deadly warning. "Any who harm her will answer to me personally." The council exchanged glances. They had expected this reaction, but they also knew that Isabella's rebellion was becoming a symbol of resistance among younger vampires across the region. Reports were coming in of vampire youth questioning traditional practices, some even attempting to integrate into human society. If something wasn't done soon, the carefully maintained balance between the vampire world and human ignorance could collapse entirely. Isabella, unaware of the political storm swirling around her choices, continued her evening routine. After finishing her shift at the college, she would walk through the quiet campus, savoring the feeling of normalcy. She had made a few human acquaintances, not close friends, as she couldn't risk them discovering her true nature, but friendly colleagues who treated her as just another young woman trying to make her way in the world. It was during one of these evening walks that Isabella first noticed Maria Santos cleaning the administrative building where she worked. Maria was a single mother in her early 30s, whose quiet efficiency and gentle demeanor caught Isabella's attention. Unlike the supernatural beings Isabella was accustomed to, Maria radiated a warmth that seemed to come from genuine kindness rather than centuries of practiced charm. Maria worked 3 jobs to support her 8-year-old son, Diego. Her day started at 5 a.m. cleaning office buildings downtown, continued with afternoon housekeeping at a local hotel, and ended with evening janitorial work at the community college. Despite this exhausting schedule, she always had a smile for everyone she encountered and a patient word for students who seemed stressed or overwhelmed. Isabella found herself lingering after work, pretending to organize files or catch up on paperwork, just to observe Maria's work routine. There was something almost meditative about watching the older woman move efficiently through her tasks, humming softly to herself while she cleaned. Maria took obvious pride in her work, ensuring every surface gleamed and every trash can was properly lined and positioned. One evening, Isabella finally worked up the courage to speak to Maria beyond their usual polite greetings. "You seem to really enjoy your work," she commented as Maria wiped down the reception desk. Maria looked up with surprise, her dark eyes crinkling with warmth. "Oh, hello Isabella. I do enjoy it, actually. There's something satisfying about leaving a place better than you found it. Plus, the quiet gives me time to think and plan." "Plan for what?" Isabella asked, genuinely curious. "My son's future mainly," Maria replied, continuing her cleaning motions. "Diego wants to be an engineer. Smart boy, gets good grades, but college isn't cheap. Every clean desk, every mopped floor gets us a little closer to his dreams." Isabella felt something stir in her chest, an emotion she couldn't quite identify. In her world, power and wealth were inherited, taken, or commanded. The idea of someone working so hard, with such dignity and purpose, for someone else's dreams was completely foreign to her experience. "That's beautiful," Isabella said softly, and meant it. Maria paused in her work, studying Isabella's face with the intuitive wisdom of someone who had spent years reading people's genuine emotions beneath their polite facades. "You sound surprised. Haven't you ever worked for something you really wanted?" The question hit Isabella like a physical blow. Had she ever really worked for anything? She had rebelled against her father's expectations, yes, but her job at the college had been easily obtained through subtle vampire influence. Her apartment hunt was funded by centuries of family wealth. Even her rebellion was, in many ways, a luxury afforded by her privileged position. "I'm not sure I have," Isabella admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Maria's expression softened. "It's never too late to start. The most rewarding things in life usually require a little sweat equity." As the weeks passed, Isabella found herself drawn into conversations with Maria that lasted well past both of their official work hours. Maria spoke about her dreams for Diego, her gratitude for steady work, and her philosophy that every person deserved dignity and respect regardless of their circumstances. In return, Isabella found herself sharing carefully edited versions of her own struggles with family expectations and her desire to find her own path. What Isabella didn't realize was that Maria had begun to suspect there was much more to the young woman's story than she was revealing. Maria had cleaned offices and interacted with people from all walks of life for over a decade. She had developed an almost supernatural ability to read between the lines of what people said and what they actually meant. Isabella's expensive clothes that she tried to downplay, her perfect posture that spoke of years of deportment training, her unconscious habit of speaking with the formal precision of someone raised in an environment where every word mattered, these details didn't escape Maria's notice. More puzzling were the small inconsistencies that suggested Isabella was hiding something significant about her background and, possibly, her very identity. The friendship between the vampire princess and the human janitor was developing into something neither of them had expected, a genuine bond that crossed not just social boundaries, but species lines that had been firmly drawn for millennia. Isabella began to see the world through Maria's eyes, understanding for the first time what true strength looked like when it came from character rather than supernatural power. Meanwhile, Maria began to care deeply about the troubled young woman who seemed so isolated despite her obvious intelligence and resources. She could sense that Isabella was running from something or someone, and her maternal instincts made her want to help, even though she didn't fully understand the situation. Neither woman realized that their growing friendship was being watched carefully by eyes that saw everything that happened in and around the Blackwood territories. Lord Damien's network of informants had reported Isabella's regular interactions with a human, and the Vampire King was beginning to see these conversations as more than just his daughter's latest act of rebellion. As autumn deepened into winter, Isabella found herself counting the hours until she could see Maria again. Their conversations had become the highlight of her existence, offering her glimpses into a world where worth was measured by character rather than bloodline, where love was expressed through sacrifice rather than domination, and where hope could flourish even in the most challenging circumstances. But, in the shadows of the vampire world, plans were being made that would test both women in ways they could never have imagined. Lord Damien's patience with his daughter's rebellion was wearing thin, and the Vampire Council was pressuring him to take decisive action before Isabella's influence spread further among their kind. The stage was being set for a confrontation that would force Isabella to choose between the safety of her supernatural heritage and the authentic human connections she had discovered. For Maria, the coming revelation would challenge everything she thought she knew about the world and her own capacity to face the impossible with courage and determination. The first sign of trouble came on a snowy December evening when Isabella arrived at work to find Maria's usual cleaning cart abandoned in the hallway, supplies scattered across the floor as if she had left in a hurry. Isabella's enhanced senses immediately picked up the scent of fear, sharp and acrid, that still lingered in the air. Her supernatural hearing caught the faint sound of Maria's voice coming from the basement storage area, tense with worry. Following the sound, Isabella discovered Maria on her phone in the supply closet, tears streaming down her face as she spoke in rapid Spanish to someone on the other end. Even without understanding every word, Isabella could sense the desperation in Maria's tone. When Maria noticed her presence, she quickly ended the call and wiped her eyes. "I'm sorry, Isabella. I know I should be working, but my babysitter called. Diego has a high fever and she doesn't know what to do. I can't afford to lose this job, but I can't leave my son sick and alone either," Maria explained, her voice breaking with exhaustion and worry. Without hesitation, Isabella made a decision that would have shocked anyone who knew her privileged background. "Go home to Diego. I'll finish your cleaning route tonight." Maria stared at her in amazement. "Isabella, you don't understand. This isn't just wiping down a few desks. It's 3 floors of bathrooms, emptying all the trash cans, mopping every hallway, and deep cleaning the laboratory spaces. It takes me 4 hours on a good night." "Then, you better show me how to do it properly before you leave," Isabella replied with a gentle smile that hid her own uncertainty. For the next hour, Maria gave Isabella a crash course in commercial cleaning, demonstrating the proper techniques for everything from mixing cleaning solutions to the most efficient way to mop large spaces. Isabella, with her vampire coordination and speed, picked up the physical aspects quickly, but she was unprepared for the sheer physical demands of the work. After Maria left, Isabella began what would become one of the most enlightening nights of her long existence. By the time she finished the first floor, her back ached in ways she had never experienced. Her expensive designer clothes were soaked with sweat and cleaning solution. Her manicured nails were chipped and dirty. But something extraordinary was happening. She felt more alive and purposeful than she had in decades. As she worked through the night, Isabella began to understand something fundamental about human dignity and the value of honest work. Every cleaned bathroom, every emptied trash can, every polished surface represented not just a task completed, but a contribution to creating a better environment for others. She thought about Maria doing this work night after night, finding pride and purpose in labor that vampire society would consider beneath contempt. Meanwhile, miles away in the Blackwood mansion, Lord Damien was discovering his daughter's absence through his network of watchers. When his informants reported that the vampire princess was spending her night doing manual labor in a human institution, his rage was unlike anything the ancient walls had witnessed in centuries. "Enough," his voice thundered through the mansion, causing centuries-old paintings to rattle in their frames. "Summon the council. Tonight, this madness ends." Within an hour, the 12 most powerful vampires in the region had assembled in the mansion's great hall. The room was a study in Gothic grandeur. Soaring ceilings disappeared into shadows, massive stone fireplaces crackled with flames that cast dancing shadows across walls lined with portraits of Blackwood ancestors, and the very air seemed thick with the weight of accumulated power and authority. Lord Damien stood before an ornate throne that had been carved from a single piece of black marble centuries ago. His presence filled the room with an energy that made even the most ancient council members unconsciously step back. "My daughter has gone too far. She works as a servant, befriends humans as equals, and now performs manual labor that degrades our entire lineage. This ends tonight." Countess Morgana Vex leaned forward eagerly. "What do you propose, my lord? Perhaps a forced turning of the human woman? Once she becomes one of us, she'll understand the natural order." "Or we could simply eliminate the human," suggested Lord Victor Castellane coldly. "Remove the source of Isabella's confusion, and she'll have no choice but to return to her proper place in our society." But Lord Damien raised a hand for silence. His red eyes glowed with dangerous intensity as he revealed his plan. "Neither. Tomorrow night, I will personally visit this human and offer her a choice. She can accept a generous financial payment to relocate far from our territory, or she can face the consequences of interfering with vampire royalty. If she's as intelligent as Isabella seems to believe, she'll take the money and disappear. And if she refuses," asked Elder Catherine Nightshade, whose family had served the Blackwoods since medieval times. "Then, she'll learn why humans have feared the darkness for millennia," Damien replied with deadly quiet. Back at the college, Isabella was finishing the final floor of her cleaning duties as dawn approached. Her vampire physiology had allowed her to work through the night without the exhaustion that would have overwhelmed a human, but she felt something more valuable than physical tiredness, a deep satisfaction that came from honest accomplishment. As she returned the cleaning supplies to their proper places, Isabella made a decision that would have terrified her just months earlier. She was going to tell Maria the truth about her supernatural nature. Not everything at once, that would be too dangerous for both of them, but enough truth to build a foundation for genuine friendship rather than the careful deception she had been maintaining. The next evening, Isabella arrived at work to find Maria back at her duties, but moving slowly and looking exhausted. Diego's fever had broken, but Maria had spent the entire day caring for him instead of sleeping between her jobs. "How did the cleaning go last night?" Maria asked, expecting to hear that Isabella had left after an hour or two once she realized the scope of the work. "I finished everything on your checklist," Isabella replied simply. "The third floor labs took longer than I expected, but I think I got them clean." Maria stared at her in disbelief, then rushed off to inspect Isabella's work. What she found amazed her. Not only was every area spotless, but Isabella had gone beyond the basic requirements. Supply closets were reorganized, equipment was positioned more efficiently, and several areas looked better than they had in months. "Isabella, this is incredible. How did you possibly manage all this?" Maria asked when she returned. Isabella took a deep breath, knowing she was about to cross a line from which there would be no return. "Maria, I need to tell you something about myself. I'm not exactly what I seem to be." Before she could continue, both women heard the sound of expensive dress shoes clicking against the polished floors of the main hallway. The footsteps were measured, deliberate, and carried an authority that made Isabella's blood freeze in recognition. Isabella Rose Blackwood. The voice that echoed through the building was cultured, commanding, and filled with barely controlled fury. "Present yourself. Now." Isabella grabbed Maria's arm instinctively. "You need to leave. Right now. Go home to Diego and don't come back here for several days." "Isabella, what's happening? Who is that?" Maria asked, her maternal instincts recognizing danger even if she didn't understand its source. "My father," Isabella whispered, her face pale with fear for Maria's safety rather than her own. "Please, just go. I'll explain everything later, but right now you need to trust me and leave." But it was too late. Lord Damien Blackwood appeared in the doorway of the office space, and his presence seemed to fill the room with shadows. He was exactly as Isabella had inherited, tall, imposing, and radiating a power that made the air itself feel heavy. His red eyes swept the room, taking in the cleaning supplies, Isabella's disheveled appearance, and, most importantly, the human woman who stood protectively close to his daughter. "So," Damien said, his voice silk over steel, "this is the human who has corrupted my daughter's mind." Maria, despite her fear, stepped slightly forward. She might not understand what was happening, but she recognized a bully when she saw one. "I don't know what your problem is with Isabella, but she's a wonderful young woman who doesn't deserve to be spoken to that way." The silence that followed Maria's words was deafening. In 8 centuries of existence, no human had ever dared to contradict Lord Damien Blackwood, let alone lecture him about his treatment of his own family. The vampire council members who had followed him into the building exchanged shocked glances, certain they were about to witness a swift and brutal execution. Instead, something unexpected happened. Damien began to laugh, not with amusement, but with the dangerous sound of a predator that had found more interesting prey than anticipated. "Fascinating," he said, circling Maria like a shark studying its target. "Isabella, your human friend has courage. Foolish, suicidal courage, but courage nonetheless." Isabella positioned herself between her father and Maria. "Leave her alone. Your quarrel is with me." "On the contrary," Damien replied, his attention still focused on Maria. "My quarrel is with the influence that has turned my daughter into a servant. Tell me, human, what hold do you have over my child that has convinced her to abandon centuries of bloodline and breeding to empty trash cans?" Maria's mind was reeling as she tried to process what she was hearing. The formal way this man spoke, the strange references to bloodlines and centuries, Isabella's obvious terror, none of it made sense, but every instinct told her that Isabella was in serious danger. "I don't have any hold over Isabella," Maria said firmly. "She's my friend. Friends support each other." "Friends?" Damien's voice dripped with contempt. "You believe you and my daughter are equals? That a human cleaning woman and vampire royalty can be friends?" The word vampire hit Maria like a physical blow. She looked at Isabella, searching her face for some sign that this was all an elaborate joke or misunderstanding. Instead, she saw confirmation in Isabella's silver eyes that suddenly seemed too bright, too knowing, too otherworldly for a normal human being. "Isabella?" Maria's voice was barely a whisper. "It's true," Isabella said quietly, her centuries of royal training keeping her voice steady despite her emotional turmoil. "I'm a vampire. My father is Lord Damien Blackwood, and I am his heir. Everything you've heard in legends and movies, most of it is real." Maria staggered backward, her mind struggling to accept this revelation. But, even as the logical part of her brain rejected the impossibility, other pieces began falling into place. Isabella's pale skin that never seemed to tan, her habit of avoiding anything but artificial lighting, her formal way of speaking, her expensive clothes and obvious wealth that she tried so hard to downplay. "You've been lying to me this whole time," Maria said, hurt and betrayal clear in her voice. "Yes," Isabella admitted, "but not about the important things. Not about caring about you and Diego, not about wanting to be a better person, not about finding meaning in honest work. Those feelings are real." Lord Damien watched this exchange with growing impatience. "Enough of this sentiment. Human woman, I am prepared to offer you compensation for the inconvenience my daughter has caused. Accept $50,000 and relocate your family outside of Massachusetts. Never contact Isabella again, and this unfortunate episode can be forgotten." Maria's shock was gradually being replaced by anger. "You think you can just buy me off? Make me disappear because I'm inconvenient to your plans for Isabella?" "I think you're a human who has forgotten her place in the natural order," Damien replied, his voice carrying the chill of the grave. "Accept my generous offer, or face the alternative." "What alternative?" Maria demanded, her Puerto Rican heritage evident in her rising temper. Damien's smile revealed fangs that gleamed like ivory daggers in the fluorescent lighting. "I could simply eliminate the problem you represent. Drain your life force and dispose of the evidence. Your disappearance would be just another unsolved missing person case that human authorities are too incompetent to solve." "Father, no." Isabella's voice carried desperate authority as she moved fully between them. "You will not harm her. I forbid it." "You forbid?" Damien's laugh was like breaking glass. Child, you have no authority to forbid anything. You are my daughter, my heir, and you will obey me as you have been raised to do. Then, you'll have to go through me to get to her, Isabella replied, her own fangs extending as her vampire nature finally emerged in protection of the human she had come to love. The standoff between father and daughter crackled with supernatural tension. Behind Damien, the vampire council watched with fascination as the notorious obedient princess finally showed the fighting spirit of her bloodline, but in defense of a human rather than vampire interests. Maria, caught between terror and confusion, realized she was witnessing something that would change all their lives forever. The quiet, gentle young woman she had befriended was revealing herself to be something out of nightmares, yet Isabella was risking everything to protect her from the monster who was apparently her own father. In that moment, Maria Santos made a decision that would echo through the vampire world for generations to come. Instead of running in terror, instead of accepting the money and disappearing, instead of allowing fear to control her actions, she stepped forward and placed herself directly beside Isabella in confronting the vampire king. Isabella is right, Maria said, her voice shaking but determined. If you want to hurt me, you'll have to go through both of us. The silence that followed Maria's declaration was absolute. In 800 years of existence, Lord Damien Blackwood had never encountered a human who willingly stood against him alongside his own daughter. The vampire council members exchanged incredulous glances, certain they were witnessing either the bravest or most foolish act in supernatural history. Damien studied the two women standing defiantly before him, his immortal daughter with her silver eyes blazing with protective fury, and the mortal human whose hands trembled but whose gaze never wavered. Something shifted in the ancient vampire's expression, though whether it was respect, curiosity, or growing rage remained unclear. Interesting, he said slowly, circling them like a predator. Tell me, human, do you understand what you're facing? I have commanded armies, toppled kingdoms, and survived longer than your civilization has existed. What makes you believe you can stand against me? Maria's voice was steady despite her fear. Because someone needs to. Isabella deserves better than a father who threatens the people she cares about. And, because running away would teach my son that it's okay to abandon your friends when things get difficult. Your son? Damien's interest sharpened dangerously. Ah yes, the 8-year-old boy. Perhaps I'd been approaching this situation incorrectly. Isabella's protective instincts exploded into action. Before her father could finish the implied threat, she launched herself at him with supernatural speed, her fangs extended and silver eyes blazing with ancestral fury. Father and daughter collided with enough force to crack the concrete floor beneath their feet. You will not touch Diego. Isabella snarled, grappling with a vampire whose centuries of experience made him far stronger than she was. I swear on our family's blood, if you harm that child, I will spend eternity hunting you down. Damien easily overpowered his daughter, pinning her against the wall with one hand around her throat. But, instead of anger, his ancient features showed something like pride. Finally, he said with satisfaction. Finally, you show the fighting spirit of our bloodline. The question is, will you fight this hard for vampire interests, or only for humans? Let her go. Maria had grabbed a mop handle and was advancing on the vampire king, her maternal instincts overriding every survival impulse she possessed. The sight of a human cleaning woman threatening him with janitorial supplies was so absurd that Damien actually paused his assault on Isabella. You cannot be serious. You're threatening me with a mop? I'm threatening you with whatever I have available, Maria replied grimly. I've raised a son on my own, worked 3 jobs to keep food on our table, and survived situations that would break most people. I'm not about to be intimidated by some overgrown bully, even if he does have fangs. Elder Catherine Nightshade whispered to her fellow council members, this human shows more backbone than half our own young vampires. Lord Victor Castellane nodded grudgingly. She's either completely insane or genuinely fearless. In either case, she's dangerous to our traditional order. Damien released Isabella and turned his full attention to Maria. You speak of survival and strength, human. But, do you understand what you're asking for? My daughter wants to live in your world, but she can never truly be part of it. She will watch your son grow old and die. She will outlive every human friend she makes. She will spend eternity caught between 2 worlds, belonging fully to neither. That's her choice to make, Maria replied, helping Isabella to her feet. Not yours, and not mine. Isabella is an adult who deserves the right to decide her own path, even if that path is difficult. And what about you? Damien asked, his red eyes boring into Maria's soul. Are you prepared for the consequences of befriending a vampire? The secrets you'll have to keep, the dangers that will surround you, the knowledge that will separate you from every other human you know? Maria looked at Isabella, seeing past the supernatural beauty to the lonely, searching young woman who had become so important to her life. Isabella saved my job when I needed to care for my sick son. She's shown me kindness without expecting anything in return. She works harder than anyone I know to become a better person. If that person happens to be a vampire, then, I guess I'm friends with a vampire. The simplicity and sincerity of Maria's acceptance hit everyone in the room like a physical force. Here was a human who had learned the truth about vampires and chosen friendship over fear, love over prejudice, courage over safety. Countess Morgana Vex could no longer contain her outrage. My lord, this mockery has gone on long enough. The human shows no proper respect for our kind. She treats your daughter as an equal rather than acknowledging her supernatural superiority. This undermines everything we've built. Perhaps, Damien said quietly, what we've built needs to be examined. The council members stared at their king in shock. These words bordered on heresy coming from the vampire who had spent centuries enforcing rigid hierarchies and absolute separation between the supernatural and human worlds. Isabella stepped forward, sensing an opportunity she had never imagined possible. Father, what if we've been wrong about humans? What if the strength we prize in our kind isn't just about power and dominance? Maria shows courage every single day, working multiple jobs to provide for her son, standing up to you despite knowing what you could do to her, accepting my true nature without running in terror. Isn't that the kind of strength our bloodline should respect? Damien walked to the window, gazing out at the pre-dawn darkness that was his natural element. For long minutes, the only sound was the soft hum of fluorescent lights and the distant rumble of early morning traffic. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of centuries of accumulated wisdom and regret. 800 years ago, I was turned during a plague that decimated Europe. I watched helplessly as disease claimed my human family, my wife, my children, my parents, while I remained untouched by the mortality that destroyed everything I loved. I swore then that vampires would never again be vulnerable to human weaknesses or dependent on human mercy. He turned back to face the group, his ancient eyes reflecting pain that predated nations. I built our society on the principle that we are superior beings who must remain apart from humanity to survive. But, perhaps I have confused strength with isolation, superiority with emotional safety. Maria found herself moved by this glimpse into the Vampire King's origin story. I'm sorry for your losses, she said gently. But, cutting yourself off from all emotional connections doesn't honor the memory of the people you loved. It just ensures you'll never experience that kind of love again. And, you believe vampires and humans can coexist? Can build meaningful relationships despite the fundamental differences in our natures? Damien asked. I think people, human or vampire, can choose to be kind or cruel, generous or selfish, loving or hateful, Maria replied. Isabella has chosen to be kind. That matters more to me than what species she belongs to. Isabella felt tears she hadn't shed in decades beginning to form in her silver eyes. Father, I don't want to abandon my heritage or reject our family. I just want to expand what it means to be a vampire. I want our kind to be known for more than fear and dominance. I want to build bridges instead of walls. The Vampire Council watched this exchange with growing unease. Everything they had believed about the natural order was being challenged by a single mother janitor and a rebellious vampire princess. Lord Victor Castellane finally spoke up. My lord, even if we accept that this human has shown unusual courage, the broader implications are catastrophic. If vampires begin forming genuine friendships with humans, our secrecy becomes impossible to maintain. Our authority structure collapses. Young vampires will question every tradition we've established. Perhaps they should, Damien said quietly, shocking everyone present. Perhaps traditions that require isolation and fear to survive aren't worth preserving. Countess Morgana Vex rose from her chair in fury. You're talking about destroying everything our ancestors built. The careful balance that has kept our kind safe for millennia. I'm talking about evolution, Damien replied. Species that fail to adapt to changing circumstances become extinct. The world has changed dramatically since I was turned. Maybe it's time for vampire society to change as well. Isabella could hardly believe what she was hearing. Are you saying you'll support my choices? Accept my friendship with Maria? Damien studied his daughter for a long moment, then shifted his gaze to Maria. I'm saying I want to understand what you found in this friendship that has changed you so fundamentally. Human woman, Maria, I formally invite you to visit our family home tomorrow evening. Bring your son. Let me see for myself what kind of people have earned my daughter's loyalty. The Vampire Council erupted in protests, but Damien silenced them with a gesture. My decision is final. However, I have conditions. He addressed Maria directly. You will tell no one about our true nature. You will reveal nothing about our location or numbers. In return, I will guarantee your safety and that of your son. Break these conditions, and our protection ends. I understand, Maria said solemnly. Furthermore, Damien continued, Isabella will spend one day each week at our ancestral estate, learning about vampire history and culture. She may live as she chooses in the human world, but she will not abandon her heritage entirely. Isabella nodded eagerly. I agree to those terms. Then, it seems we have an accord, Damien said. Though I suspect this arrangement will prove more challenging for all of us than any of you realize. As the Vampire King and his council departed, leaving Isabella and Maria alone in the cleaning supply closet, both women struggled to process what had just occurred. I still can't quite believe any of this is real, Maria said, sinking into a chair. Vampires, supernatural councils, immortal bloodlines, it sounds like something from a movie. It's real, Isabella confirmed gently. And, I understand if you need time to adjust to everything you've learned tonight. I won't blame you if you decide this friendship is too complicated or dangerous. Maria looked at her vampire friend, the young woman who had cleaned an entire building to help her care for her sick son, who had risked her relationship with her family to defend a human, who had shown more genuine kindness than many people Maria had known her entire life. Isabella, I've been a single mother working multiple jobs in a world that doesn't always treat people like me with respect or dignity. I've faced challenges that would have broken a lot of people. I'm not about to let a little thing like you being a vampire scare me away from the best friendship I've had in years. 6 months later, the most unlikely friendship in supernatural history had not only survived but flourished. Maria and Diego became regular visitors to the Blackwood estate, where the 8-year-old boy showed no fear of vampire lore and quickly charmed even the most traditional council members with his curiosity and good manners. Isabella had moved into a modest apartment near Maria's neighborhood, spending her days helping Diego with homework and her evenings working alongside Maria at the college. She had also begun using her supernatural abilities and family resources to secretly help other single parents in the community, providing anonymous scholarships and assistance to families struggling with basic needs. The vampire community remained divided about these changes. Younger vampires increasingly questioned traditional isolationist policies, inspired by Isabella's example. Several had begun cautiously reaching out to humans in their communities, testing whether genuine friendships were possible. Meanwhile, older vampires worried about maintaining secrecy and authority in a world where their princess cleaned bathrooms and their king invited human children to family dinners. Lord Damien himself had undergone perhaps the most dramatic transformation. Observing Maria's relationship with Diego had reawakened emotions he had buried for centuries. He found himself remembering what it felt like to love someone whose mortality made every moment precious. Though he would never admit it publicly, he had begun to understand why Isabella valued her human connections so deeply. The real test came when Diego fell seriously ill with pneumonia just before Christmas. Maria, exhausted from working extra holiday shifts while caring for her son, collapsed from stress and fatigue. Without hesitation, Isabella revealed her true nature to the boy, using her supernatural speed to get him to the hospital and her family's resources to ensure he received the best possible medical care. Diego's reaction to learning his favorite babysitter was a vampire was remarkably practical for an 8-year-old. Cool. Can you turn into a bat? Do you sleep in a coffin? Will you live forever? But it was his next comment that truly captured the transformation that had occurred in all their lives. Isabella, does this mean you're not going anywhere? Because Mom really needs friends who stay. Looking at this brave little boy who had accepted her supernatural nature without fear, at Maria whose exhausted face showed complete trust in her vampire friend, Isabella realized she had found something she had been searching for her entire existence, a family bound not by blood or species, but by choice, love, and mutual respect. The vampire princess and the single mother Janitor had indeed defied everyone's expectations. They had proven that courage comes in many forms, that true strength often wears the disguise of gentleness, and that the most powerful transformations happen not through force or dominance, but through the simple act of choosing to see the best in each other. In the supernatural world, their friendship became a legend that challenged centuries of established beliefs about the impossibility of genuine connection between vampires and humans. In the human world, their bond remained a quiet example of how ordinary people can accomplish extraordinary things when they choose love over fear and friendship over prejudice. And, in the Blackwood mansion, where portraits of fierce vampire ancestors gazed down from ancient walls, a new portrait was commissioned, one showing Lord Damien with his daughter Isabella, a smiling Puerto Rican woman named Maria, and an 8-year-old boy named Diego whose bright eyes held the promise of a future where supernatural and human lives could intertwine in ways previous generations had never dared to imagine.